The fire that once burned on the Virginia plantation was not the only thing that turned to ash that night. A woman, barefoot and trembling, ran beneath a blood-red moon, her chains left behind in the mud. They said no slave ever reached Boston alive, but she did. And when a white man tried to command her once more, she stared into his eyes and whispered something that no one like her had ever dared to say before. No, I was born in the year 1824, on the edge of a tobacco field in Hanover County, Virginia. They said my mother screamed my name into the night, but the overseer silenced her with the back of his whip. I never heard her voice again. From my first breath, I belonged to a man, not a god, not a father, a man named Colonel Graves, who owned 300 acres and the people who worked it. We were not allowed names, only sounds that pleased the mistress. She called me Martha, but my mother once whispered my real name before she was taken away, Amahol, meaning the beautiful one, in a tongue that no longer belonged to us. I learned early that beauty was a curse. The mistress would glare when her husband's eyes lingered too long. At 12, I was taken from the field and brought inside the big house to clean her silver, brush her hair, and pretend I didn't hear the screams of those left outside. The nights were the worst. The creak of the door meant someone was coming. The overseer, Mr. Tate, liked to test obedience. He'd hold a lantern close to my face and whisper, "Do you know your place, girl?" I always said yes, because saying no meant the whip. Saying no meant the post. I remember the smell of smoke, the scent of roasted meat at Christmas feasts, while our people starved outside. They toasted wine to freedom, to God, while we knelt in the cold and prayed for something we had never seen. Sometimes I'd sneak to the old church by the marsh. The preacher was a slave too, with chains around his wrists as he spoke. He said, "The Lord hears even the silent cries." But I stopped believing in silence. Silence never saved anyone. When the colonel died, his son took over, younger, crueler. He liked to remind us that freedom was a lie told by Yankees who'd never seen blood in the soil. I believed him for a long time, until the night I found a scrap of paper behind the mistress's desk, a newspaper from Boston, speaking of free men and women of color walking the streets without chains. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the hearth, my hands shaking, imagining what it felt like to walk under a sky where no one called you property. They say every slave dreams of escape, but dreams are dangerous things on a plantation. Still, I kept that scrap hidden under my mattress, whispering those words when the nights grew heavy. Boston. Freedom. No, I didn't yet know that someday I would speak that same word aloud, not as a whisper of hope, but as a weapon. The new master, Edward Graves, arrived from Richmond wearing the scent of tobacco and arrogance. He was not like his father, he was worse. Where the colonel ruled with cold control, Edward ruled with hunger. He saw people not as hands, but as prey. He called us to the courtyard on his first day, boots polished, coat shining under the sun. "You belong to me now," he said. Body, soul, and silence. His voice carried across the fields like thunder. Nobody dared to breathe. He had eyes like mirrors. They reflected only himself. And when they fell upon me, I felt the same fear my mother must have felt. From that day, my name was always the first he called. Inside the house, he turned every hour into a test. I could feel him watching when I scrubbed the floors, when I poured his whiskey, when I tried to make myself invisible. But invisibility does not protect a woman in chains. The overseer, Tate, had a new order: keep her in line. She's got spirit. Spirit, that word cost many lives. It was what they called defiance when you refused to cry, when you dared to stand straight. He made sure to crush it. Some nights, I heard the whip outside my window, the rhythm of pain. They said it was for the field hands who dropped cotton or spoke out of turn. But one night, I recognized the cry. It was Ruth, my friend since childhood, who had only begged for more food for her sick child. They hanged her by morning. The child disappeared by nightfall. That was the moment I stopped praying for freedom. I began praying for vengeance. Days turned to years. Each harvest took more from our bodies. Edward drank more, raged louder. He'd gather the men in the parlor and speak of northern devils, of abolitionists who'd rot this land. And we'd listen from the shadows, counting his words like seeds, seeds that would one day grow into rebellion. I remember a night before Christmas, 1846. The air smelled of pine and blood. Tate dragged me to the big house, his breath sour with whiskey. Edward was there, laughing with friends, talking of horses and politics, as if the world outside wasn't built on screens. He called me closer. His friends stared. I looked at him, at the man who owned my breath, and for the first time, I didn't bow. Something changed inside me that night. It wasn't courage. Courage dies too quickly here. It was anger. Quiet, deep, like a river that cuts through stone. After they left, I went to the kitchen and stared at the fire. I thought of Ruth, of my mother, of every woman who never got to say no. And right then, under that dark Virginia sky, I whispered to the flames, I will not die here. But what I did next would make sure none of them ever forgot my name. It began with whispers, soft, secret, trembling things that traveled between the cabins when the moon was kind. We spoke in the language of looks and silence, passing hope like contraband. Hope was dangerous, but so was despair. Old Isaac, who had once been sold 3 times, told me of a preacher up north who hid runaways beneath church floors. Boston, he said in a voice no louder than a breath, is where a person can own their soul again. The word Boston burned in me like a fever. I carried it while I worked, while I slept, while Edward's laughter echoed through the halls. Every sound on that plantation became a reminder of what waited beyond the trees. Then one night, I found my chance, born from cruelty itself. Edward planned a grand New Year's feast for his friends, a celebration of Southern strength. He ordered the slaves to prepare a table that could shame kings. Roasted lamb, sugared pears, wine from France. And for us, nothing. But in the kitchen, while the mistress counted silverware, I found something that changed everything. A small glass vial in a wooden box. The label read laudanum. I'd seen the doctor use it once on a horse before it was put down. Too much, and it would silence even a scream. That night, as I stood by the fire stirring stew for the feast, I felt my hands tremble, not from fear, but from choice. The voices in my head fought each other. One begged for mercy, the other whispered vengeance. Lord, I said, staring into the boiling pot, forgive me, but I have no room for forgiveness left. The kitchen smelled of herbs, smoke, and justice. I poured a few drops into the stew, just enough to make hearts heavy and tongues slow. Then I hid the vial beneath the ashes, where no man would ever look. When the feast began, I watched them eat. Edward, Tate, the guests who spoke of God's will between bites of stolen food. Their laughter filled the room like thunder. But I didn't hear it. I only heard my heartbeat. Later that night, when Edward called me to refill his cup, he stumbled, eyes glassy, words slurred. You're lucky, he muttered, to serve me. I smiled for the first time in years. No, I whispered. You're lucky I haven't yet taken more. He laughed, thinking me weak. But weakness was the mask that freedom wore until the right moment. After the feast, while the men slept heavy with wine and laudanum, I crept out to the barn. The moonlight lay silver on the road, stretching north like a promise. I took one last look at the house, that great white tomb of screams, and I swore I'd never set foot there again. With nothing but stolen boots and Ruth's old shawl, I stepped into the dark. Each step away from the plantation felt like tearing skin from bone, but I kept walking, because somewhere beyond that endless road, a word waited for me, a word I had never spoken aloud. Freedom. The night I ran, the sky had no stars. Only the wind followed me, carrying the scent of pine and fire, whispering names of those who never made it this far. I didn't dare look back. Behind me lay chains and graves. Ahead, only the dark. I moved through the fields like a ghost, the frost biting through my bare feet. Every rustle of grass felt like a scream, but I kept moving. The map in my head was made from overheard words. Follow the river north until it meets the road, then the road to the old mill, then beyond that, the woods where the patrols don't ride. By dawn, I was miles away. My body ached, my throat raw, but the air smelled different. It didn't carry the whip or the smoke of the big house. For the first time, the world smelled alive. But freedom, I learned, was not a clean road. It was a hunted path. By the second night, I heard the dogs, the overseer's hounds, trained to find fear. Their howls cut through the forest like knives. My heart hammered, but I couldn't stop. I crawled through swamps, waded through freezing water, hid in hollow trees when lanterns passed. Once, I slipped and fell into the mud. I could hear the men shouting, "Bring her back alive. The master wants her alive." Alive. That word sounded crueler than death. I pressed my face into the dirt, praying they wouldn't see the shape of me. One of the dogs came close, its snout inches from my hand. I didn't breathe. Somewhere, a whip cracked, and the beast turned away. By the time they moved on, I was shaking, but still whole. 3 days passed like that, hunger clawing my belly, cold gnawing my bones. I followed the North Star, just as Isaac said. It was small, faint, but constant, a single white eye watching over me. Then one morning, I reached the river that marked the edge of Virginia. The water was black, cold as death. But on the other side was Maryland, and beyond that, the way north. I stepped into the water, the current biting hard. It pulled at my legs, my skirt, my strength. I thought I would drown. My body screamed for air, for warmth, for mercy. But I kept whispering one word between gulps of icy water: no. When I crawled onto the far bank, I lay in the mud, gasping, laughing, crying all at once. I was still alive. Barely, but alive. Weeks later, I don't know how, I reached Boston. My hands were torn, my feet raw, but when I walked through those crowded streets, no one called me girl or slave. They didn't even look at me twice. A kind woman at a church took me in. She gave me food, a name, and a bed that didn't belong to anyone else. That night, when she said, "You can rest now," I didn't understand the words. Rest was something for free people, and for the first time, I dared to believe that I might be one. Freedom did not come wrapped in joy. It came in silence, heavy, unfamiliar, almost frightening. The first night I slept in Boston, I woke 3 times, waiting for the sound of the whip or the master's footsteps. But there was only wind outside, whistling through the thin walls like a hymn I didn't yet understand. Mrs. Avery's house was small but clean. The floorboards didn't creak with authority. Still, I couldn't bring myself to sit on a chair or eat without asking. She'd laugh softly, saying, "You're free now, child." But those words felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking someone else's language. I spent my days at the laundry, bent over steaming tubs. The heat on my face reminded me of the plantation fires, only now it didn't smell of pain. Sometimes I'd glance out the window and see children running, laughing without fear. I didn't know laughter could sound so pure, but even in freedom, ghosts followed me. When men passed me on the street, I'd step aside. When someone raised their voice, I'd flinch. Boston was loud, wagons clattering, bells ringing, yet I still heard Virginia in every echo. At night, I'd sit by the window watching the lamps burn across the harbor. Each light, I imagined, was another soul who made it out, another runaway who dared to dream. But for every light, I remembered a face that didn't make it. Ruth, Isaac, my mother. Their voices filled the dark, reminding me that my freedom had been bought with their silence. One morning, a group of women came to the church, black and white together, handing out pamphlets. They called themselves abolitionists. One of them, a pale woman with kind eyes, asked for my story. "People need to know what it was like," she said. But I couldn't speak. My voice trembled, my throat closed. How could I tell them that freedom was not a door opening, but a wound that would never close? Still, she returned each week, bringing bread and books. "You should learn to read," she told me. "Every word you learn is another chain broken." So I tried, slowly, letter by letter, sound by sound. And one night, by candlelight, I read my first word. It was small, written in fading ink. Free. I wept until the candle died. Months passed, and my body healed, though my soul still carried the marks. Yet, somewhere between the washroom and the church pew, I began to stand straighter. I began to walk without looking down. Freedom didn't arrive with trumpets or praise. It came quietly, in the way I could breathe without permission, sleep without fear, speak without trembling. And though the world outside was still cruel, still stained with the same hate I had fled, I knew I would never kneel again. Because I had learned the hardest truth of all, that the chains were not just around my wrists. They had lived inside me too. And now, I was finally breaking those as well. Sometimes, I still wake before dawn, my body expecting orders that no longer come. In those moments between sleep and sunrise, I feel both the girl I was and the woman I have become. Two souls trapped in the same skin, fighting to belong to different worlds. Boston has grown kinder with time, or perhaps I have simply grown less afraid of it. I've learned to walk its streets without shrinking from the eyes that follow me, though some still see my skin before they see my face. Yet when the church bells ring on Sundays, I remember the rhythm of the fields, the call of the overseer, the rustle of chains. Those memories cling like the smell of smoke that never truly leaves. Freedom, I have learned, is not a single moment. It is 1,000 small choices made every day. The choice to wake and face the world. The choice to speak when silence feels safer. The choice to forgive yourself for surviving when others did not. I used to believe that the worst thing slavery took from us was our bodies. But I was wrong. It took our sense of self, the right to feel worthy of love, of peace, of rest. I spent months in freedom still apologizing for existing. Until one morning, I caught my reflection in the basin water. My hair was tied, my hands rough from work, my eyes tired, but they were mine. For the first time, I saw not a servant, not property, not a shadow of someone else's will. I saw me. There was power in that recognition, quiet but unshakable. It didn't erase the pain, but it began to give it meaning. I started writing names, those I remembered from the plantation, in a small notebook. Each one a memorial, a promise that their stories wouldn't vanish like smoke. Writing them down felt like calling their spirits home. Sometimes I visit the docks and watch the ships drift beyond the horizon. I imagine what lies beyond, lands where no one owns another soul. I wonder what it would feel like to start over, to belong to no past, to no master, to no memory but my own. But I know now that running is not the same as being free. True freedom is standing still and facing what haunts you. I faced my ghosts, the faces of those I lost, the echo of the man who called himself my master, the voice that once told me I was nothing. I face them all and say, you don't own me anymore. There is a peace in that defiance, not loud, not grand, but steady, like the heartbeat I once wished would stop. Now, when I hear laughter in the street or a child call for their mother, I smile. Because I've learned that life, for all its cruelty, always finds a way to bloom again. And though I still carry the scars of the past, they no longer define me. They are not marks of shame, they are proof that I endured. Proof that I am still here. Years have passed since I first set foot on the cold stones of Boston. The world has changed in ways I could never have dreamed, yet sometimes, in the stillness of night, I wonder if the echoes of the past ever truly fade. They say time heals, but I've learned that time doesn't erase the past. It only buries it under new names, new cities, new silence. I've lived long enough to see young women walk these streets without bowing their heads, to see men of my color speak freely without fear of the whip. And yet, deep down, I know the soil still remembers. Every brick of every house was laid by hands like mine, tired, trembling, unseen. I spend my mornings by the window now, the same way my mistress once did. But unlike her, I do not look out to judge. I look to remember. Children play in the square, free, loud, careless. Their laughter feels like a hymn, like redemption. I've begun teaching some of them to read, girls who remind me of myself at 12, when I first dared to whisper the letters of my own name. When I see their eyes widen with understanding, I think, this is how we rewrite history, not with revenge, but with remembrance. There's a small chest under my bed. Inside it lies the notebook I started years ago, names written in careful strokes, stories half told, prayers half finished. I know one day, when I am gone, someone will find it. Perhaps a daughter, or a stranger with gentle hands. They'll read those names aloud, and for a moment, those lost voices will rise again. That thought brings me peace. Because if pain must exist, then let it at least become something that teaches, something that warns. Sometimes I walk to the church by the river, the same one where, years ago, I sat trembling, afraid to be seen. The pews still creak, the candles still flicker, and the light still falls on the wooden cross just the same. But I no longer sit in the shadows. I stand at the front now, where the light touches my face. I close my eyes and whisper for those who never had the chance to escape, for Samuel, for Ruth, for every soul still trapped in the pages of forgotten ledgers. And as the bells toll, I imagine them walking beside me. No chains, no masters, no fear. Freedom, I've learned, isn't a place. It's a legacy, something passed from one trembling hand to another, growing stronger each time it's remembered. When I die, I don't want marble or flowers. Just my name, Sarah, carved into wood, plain and honest. And beneath it, a single line. She lived once as property, but died as her own. Let the wind carry my story where I cannot go. Let the earth hold what remains of me. And if one day someone whispers my name and feels the courage to say no, then I will still be alive, in every heartbeat that refuses to bow again.